From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. The Social Minga is growing across Colombia, with more supporters joining on the 27th day of demonstrations. On Thursday, students of the University of Cauca ratified their support for the Minga, which is led by indigenous communities, Afro-descendants and campesinos. Young people across Colombia have also denounced threats and repression by police against demonstrators. They have said that at least 3 of their colleagues have been detained. Organizers say the Minga Social won't stop until President Iván Duque negotiates and recognizes their demands. More than 12,000 people have joined these protests. And members of the reincorporation centers for the former FARC have joined the Minga and denounced that police forces are restricting their right to protest. In a video posted on social media, a group of people in Incononso, Tolima, were prevented from protesting by 2 policemen. A member of the group is shown explaining to the police that her banners say "In defense of our territory, life and peace," and "No to hydrocarbon exploitations." One of the policemen is heard saying that he has orders from the presidency not to let demonstrators carry banners against President Iván Duque. Meanwhile, a group of Colombian activists have been mobilizing in Europe, demanding an end to the persecution of Colombian social leaders. They will march from Paris to The Hague, more than 400 kilometers away, to denounce the 570 murders of social leaders and activists since the peace agreements were signed in 2016. The Colombian President Iván Duque has not explained yet why Venezuelan military deserters remain in the border city of Cúcuta. Videos have been circulating which suggest they are receiving training as part of the so-called Freedom Operation announced by the opposition figure Juan Guaidó to remove the government in Venezuela.
Senator Antonio Sanguino has condemned the fact that Venezuelan deserters could be receiving training in hotels on Colombian territory to prepare a military operation against the government of Nicolás Maduro.
There are videos in which soldiers appear with hoods on and admit that they are part of Operation Freedom and that the operation is waiting for orders from the supposed interim president Juan Guaidó to begin military action against the Venezuelan National Guard, which is loyal to President Maduro.
In this video, one of them speaks with an air military authority in an attempt to split the armed forces.
We are here in the city with only one mission, which is to free our country, following the instructions given by our Commander-in-Chief, Juan Guaidó, as part of Operation Libertad.
The Colombian government denies all this, but it still hasn't clarified the situation of these former soldiers in Colombia, 1 month after they entered the country.
There's no military training in Cúcuta. That is false. And anyone who says that, and I say this bluntly, although I don't like to use the word, is lying. The only training they might be receiving from the National Training Institute is information technology and communications.
The human rights defender Wilfredo Cañizares says the Colombian government must explain if these former soldiers are refugees, why are they still being kept in hotels in Cúcuta and Villa del Rosario, and why are they talking about Operation Freedom?
There is no reason for them to be in places like these, for them to be locked up and prevented from leaving or speaking to anyone. They are virtually imprisoned. What is the Colombian government waiting for? What is it organizing with these soldiers? Why do they refuse to deal with this matter publicly and transparently?
The UN Agency for Refugees, the ACNUR, has also not said anything about these actions, which would contravene the international rules on refugees and would also mean that President Iván Duque is in breach of the Colombian Constitution.
In other news, the first bilateral economic and business forum was held in Moscow to strengthen cooperation between Venezuela and Russia. Our correspondent Hans Eloro was there and has the details.
In the framework of this fourth Venezuelan-Russian Joint Commission, the two delegations developed the first Business Economic Forum to contribute to commercial development in the industrial area and the supply from Russia of a variety of pharmaceutical and agro-food products. This is part of an strategic alliance between both countries that in words of Tatiana Moskova, General Director of this Commission, it is without a doubt the way to strengthen the bilateral relations. Nearly 300 businessmen participated in this event, from both the private and the state sector of this Euro-Asiatic nation. Venezuelan Minister of Agriculture Wilmer Castro Soteldo also participated. He pointed out that it's necessary to expand the economic horizons between these two countries and maintain the guarantee around 60% of the wheat that comes from Russia to Venezuela. Minister Castro Soteldo also spoke about the exchange of technology and to enhance the mechanization and modernization of this sector in the Bolivarian nation. The topic of fertilizers also was addressed, a strong issue that Venezuela is negotiating with Russia. The Minister of Planning, Ricardo Menendez, mentioned that this strategic alliance could also contribute to modernization and provide security to the Venezuelan electrical system, especially taking in account the computer attacks that occur at the Guri hydroelectric power plant. More important agreements between these two countries will be signed, one related to the supply of pharmaceutical products, another in reference to the transportation sector.
That was Hans Deloro from Moscow. And Jamaica's ruling party is claiming victory in the hotly contested by-election in Portland Eastern. The party says Anne-Marie Vaz will be the first female member of parliament to represent the constituency. The seat was left vacant following the murder of MP Dr. Linvale Bloomfield in February. The win means the ruling party will increase its narrow House majority. A cross-party committee has been created by the members of the National Assembly in Ecuador to investigate its president, Elizabeth Cabezas. The committee was approved with 123 votes in favor and 1 abstention. Now, 3 Assembly members will have to investigate the president of the Assembly, accused of blocking a corruption probe against President Lenín Moreno over the INA Papers scandal. An audio was leaked in March where Cabezas was heard talking to Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo, allegedly about the votes needed to prevent the investigation.
This concerns the President of the National Assembly. We have to defend the institution.
We do not have to be confused about this. This is not a criminal case. Recently, we received an important recommendation from the Observatory of the Legislative Power, and the reform of the legislative function is clear. These determination processes do not require to verify the legality of the evidence because we are not handling a judicial case here.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. It has been almost 40 years since hundreds of indigenous people in Guatemala were forced off their lands and massacred to make way for the construction of the Chicxoy hydroelectric dam. Yet, displaced families are still fighting with the Guatemalan government for compensation for the atrocities.
Indigenous families, representing 33 displaced communities in central Guatemala, have staged a sit-in protest in front of the presidential palace. They were displaced almost 40 years ago due to construction of the Chicxoy hydroelectric dam in the north of the country. Over the years, they have faced various problems and now demand that the government compensate them.
The Chicxoy hydroelectric dam flooded 50 kilometers land. Some families were evicted, but there were communities who were simply massacred, and that's why the people who are here today demand that they receive reparations for these serious human rights violations.
In 2014, the Guatemalan government issued a decree to compensate the displaced families with land and health and education programs. But communities say none of these promises have been kept. Displaced people who were children at the time say they really don't want the same fate for their children.
We suffered a lot back then because we had nowhere to go, nowhere to collect firewood, nowhere to grow our food. That's why we are here, so that the government will fulfill its promises, so we can move on with our lives. Maybe this time it won't be the same.
The construction of the Chicxoy hydroelectric dam began in 1976. The military regime at the time and the security personnel of the project forcibly evicted hundreds of indigenous people from the area, but those who resisted were killed without mercy.
In total, 447 brothers and sisters and children were slaughtered. The first massacre took place on March 4th, 1980, because our brothers didn't want to leave their lands.
The dam was financed by loans from the World Bank and Inter-American Development Bank. Yet these international organizations, dedicated to supporting development, didn't pay any reparations for the damage it had caused, and they haven't pressured the Guatemalan government to compensate displaced families.
On Thursday, indigenous communities from Embera-Huaunán County demonstrated in Panama City against a government investment plan in their region, which would mean exploitation of the area's natural resources. Demonstrators say they don't know the authorities planning the initiative. Embera-Huaunán is known for its natural resources, among them Cocobolo wood, which is illegally exploited by corporations. The communities are demanding that international bodies like the Inter-American Development Bank stop financing this kind of exploitative projects. A plan to implement a policy to register Venezuelan nationals with Trinidad's immigration is now being discussed. The policy, still subject to approval, will allow Venezuelans to work in Trinidad for a year. A 2-week period has been proposed for the registration process.
Today, I did take to Cabinet a note with a proposed policy as to how we would deal with the Venezuelans who are in Trinidad and Tobago and the whole registration process. That note went to Cabinet today. I've made certain proposals to Cabinet. A decision was taken to send it to the Finance and General Purposes Committee, which will sit on Monday. That is the committee, a subcommittee of Cabinet that looks at some of our Cabinet notes in more detail and interrogates it better. As you would be aware, this policy has very far-reaching effects. There are a lot of things to consider, etc. So we will be considering the note on.
Since 2011, the Cuban singer-songwriter Silvio Rodriguez has been giving a series of concerts in neighborhoods across the island. He just gave the 100th performance, and our correspondent was there.
This Mexican visitor is heading through Jesus del Monte, one of the Havana neighborhoods worst affected by a tornado in January. He saw in the internet that this is where Silvio Rodriguez will be holding his 100th neighborhood concert, so he put off going home. I think he's a very authentic person. Sometimes his lyrics are a bit complicated, but he tries to communicate the best of human values, love, justice, and he leads by his example, which is very important. These Silvio fans are from Argentina and Chile. They were in Cuba on holiday and were the first to arrive for the concert, to make sure of a space in the front row.
He has ideals, charisma, and genuine values. He's certainly one of the best songwriters ever. The content, the music, everything.
Finally, Silvio appears on the stage, but without his guitar. He wants to explain that he never saw these neighborhood concerts as something special, because the artists of his generation always played in poor communities, schools, workplaces, and prisons. He says he's an admirer of the Spanish poet Federico García Lorca, who mounted on a stage and actors on the back of a truck and took poetry to the people in the 1930s.
Another example is that of our dancers, Alicia and Fernando Alonso. The first time I saw theater was not in a theater, but in the street outside Havana University, when Alicia and Fernando performed there with the National Ballet of Cuba. So everything we're doing has been done before.
People settle in as best they can in this working-class area still recovering from the tornado damage. And Silvio begins his concert number 100. This may not be the most common kind of music in this community, but the audience sings along.
These are not meant to be didactic songs, but they are meant to be poetic. They aim to communicate and change people. They get inside you, bring truths, knowledge, questions. They make you better.
With more than 20 albums behind him, Silvio has become an icon of Cuba's musical revolution. He says these neighborhood concerts are some of his favorites.
And with his music, we're taking one last break. Stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A humanitarian ship with over 64 migrants on board is stuck in the Mediterranean Sea after several European countries refused to let it dock in their ports. The migrants were rescued off the coast of Libya by the German humanitarian group CI. Over 30,000 migrants lost their lives between 2014 and 2018 while attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea to escape conflicts and poverty in their home countries. An army faction loyal to Khalifa Haftar has been pushed back from Tripoli after advancing on the Libyan capital. The fighters were pushed back on Friday from a key checkpoint less than 30 kilometers from Tripoli. Militiamen from the coastal town of Zawiya, west of Tripoli, retook the outpost after a short exchange of fire. Haftar's forces advanced on Thursday as the United Nations prepares to convene a conference on holding delayed elections in the North African country later this month. South Africa's Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party is holding its first National Congress and manifesto launch. The launch is being attended by over 1,000 delegates from across the country and also from political and social movements from Zambia, Brazil, Spain, Palestine and the United States. Speaking during the launch, the party's leader, Irvin Jim, urged South Africans to vote for a party that puts the interests of the poor first. A project launched in North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo is aimed at rewriting the country's history and helping children to take charge of their destiny. Our correspondent, Oscar Epelde, reports.
In the distance, the Nyiragongo volcano, which makes it easier for bandits to vanish into nature.
At 1840, bandits broke into my place. We were hit and told to lie on the floor. They had weapons. Outside our house, they killed a mother. Further along, they killed a young man and kidnapped his sister. They kidnapped us too, and only released us when they got a load of money.
At any time, they come and steal from us. We want to live in peace. There are soldiers on the hill. We need them to do their job and protect us.
The library is one of the tools that allow children to write about our history and get to know the world, thanks to the books. Every time they come to study, they bring food for their rabbits, leaves which they gather anywhere, and they each bring some kilos of fertile soil to make a seabed where they can plant trees. They have to understand that the solutions are always local, and they are the ones who have to apply them. We want to teach children the value of responsibility so they can take control of their own lives.
The Leopard Education Program deals with local history, so the children can understand both the potential and the difficulties of their community, also the history of their people, including the slave trade that went on in the 15th century at the foot of the same volcanoes. They also write about their own personal history.
We asked them where they came from. Some of them knew and others didn't. This gave us the chance to assign them homework where they talked to their parents to find out where they come from. Ndosho is a young neighborhood. It was formed in 1996, so the children researched their own biographies and wrote about it themselves. This helps to boost their self-esteem. Psychologically, we want to encourage this, because not many people in this country can write and research like that. It stimulates them.
Using local resources, they also made a documentary about Lumumba.
They worked with a local journalist who had recorded some material, and they produced this film. It wasn't very sophisticated, but it was shown at a festival. It's about Lumumba, and the actors were the children and Mama Prefi.
Les entreprises et les églises, la bière et la prière.
The documentary tells the story of a teacher who organizes with his students, in spite of all the difficulties, a show about the end of mediocrity.
The British Prime Minister Theresa May has written to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, asking for a Brexit extension until June 30th. On Thursday, the House of Commons passed a bill demanding that the PM ask for an extension to avoid a no-deal scenario. Tusk had offered an extension of a year, but May is trapped by pro-leave elements within the right-wing Conservative Party. The move comes as negotiations between the governing Tory party and the opposition Labour Party continue, seeking to find a Brexit consensus. In Ireland, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with the Irish head of government Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. On Thursday was done to address the possible complications of a no-deal Brexit scenario for the country. Ireland is determined to avoid a hard border between the north of Ireland, which is UK territory, and the Republic.
We said that if the UK had not ratified the withdrawal agreement, it should come forward with a clear plan for the way forward by next week, or it would leave the European Union on the 12th of April without a deal. This is an outcome that none of us want to see. Matters continue to play out in London, and I think we need to be patient and understanding of the predicament that they're in. But of course, any further extension must require and must have a credible and realistic way forward.
A van bearing a pro-free speech message has arrived at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. It did so after suggestions that Ecuador is preparing to expel WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange from its UK embassy in the coming days. The ban highlights US hypocrisy as the country declares itself a defender of free speech, even as it seeks to censor journalists like Assange. All this comes after a tweet by WikiLeaks that said that the Ecuadorian government will use the INA Papers scandal, which accuses President Lenín Moreno of corruption, as a pretext to expel Assange. With that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can read more on these stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. And you can join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.